Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I am revisiting the overheating problem that the Chevelle has had. I've made a video of it last year. If you haven't seen it, check the link in the description and give it a watch. But we are going to be working on the cooling system and hopefully we can fix this problem. From the previous video, you'll know that this cooling system actually works really well when the car is moving. On the highway, it barely gets up to 160 degrees. But at idle, when the car isn't moving for extended periods of time, the temperatures just keep climbing and climbing and climbing to the point where it's overheating. So I bought a few different parts and hopefully we can fix this problem. So the parts that I picked up, which took a long time to get due to the pandemic, is number one, a radiator cap. Sounds stupid, right? Well, I did some reading, and in some cases, a faulty radiator cap can apparently prevent the cooling system from functioning correctly. I think that's more with systems that have an external reservoir, and I just have an overflow, which I assume is working right. So I don't think this is going to make much of a difference, but for $5, we'll give it a shot. I picked up a new cooling fan. This is a Duraley 19-inch. And it is steel, which is unfortunate. I wish it was aluminum, but hey, that's okay. It's only a couple pounds heavier. The fan that I currently run is 18 inches. It's aluminum. It's a fixed fan, and it doesn't have a very good pitch to the blades, I guess, visually speaking. So I'm hoping the much more curvature in the Duraley fan is going to be enough to, pull a lot more air. To go along with the fan, we have a Hayden thermal clutch, part number 2747. I've never run a clutch fan. I've never installed one, obviously, but from the comparisons that I've seen, which is a great one on Engine Masters. If you have Motor Trend on Demand, check it out. The clutch fan seems to offer better performance than the flex fan. So I decided to go this way. Also, I'm curious how this is going to work with temperatures, because obviously as the RPM spin up, this is not going to allow the fan to spin at the same RPM. Is that going to be better or worse for performance? We'll see. The last thing that I purchased, which honestly I'm kind of hoping I don't even have to install it, is this March crankshaft pulley. The reason is the pulley system I have right now is 25% underdriven, meaning the cooling fan is spinning 25% less RPM at idle than the engine. This not only has an effect on the coolant flow, because obviously the water pump's spinning slower as well, but it actually means the fan is not going to pull as much air through. And honestly, I think this is going to be the most likely solution to fixing our problem. I'm just a little hesitant because the few horsepower that underdrive pulleys may save, I kind of want to keep, but in the end of the day, it's probably negligible, and this will likely go on, but we'll see. So just getting a baseline for temperatures. The dash gauge is reading 204. The Thytech is reading 210, and it slowly keeps climbing. And I guess when it gets to maybe 215-ish, then I will cool it down. So I think this is hot enough. The dash is saying 213, Thytech's saying 222. We're gonna go drive around and cool this down. So the radiator cap I currently have is a spin lock, 14 to 18 pounds. It clearly says test or replace when changing coolant. This has never been changed. So I'm replacing it with a Stant 16-pound vented cap. Again, I don't think this is going to make a difference at all, but we'll give it a shot. Well, it's still climbing. I think it actually took a little bit longer to get to this temperature, but regardless, I would say it did not fix the problem, which was expected. So we'll move on to the fan now. Mounting the fan onto the thermal clutch, make sure you mount it the correct way. You can see this says towards the radiator, so it has to go like this. Now, you'll see that it appears like the fan will not fit over that flange, but it does. You just got to give it a good angle. find the correct, there it goes, just like so. However, I did find that in here, like this area right around here, it does not sit flush. So I don't know if this is like almost a press on, or if I'm gonna have to do a little grinding just to make sure this can fit. So we'll see. The Hayden clutch came with some lock washers, but it didn't come with any bolts. So it says to get 5/16 by 5/8. I could not find any 5/8, so I had to get 3/4. So I'm gonna have to use a washer just to fill up that space. I'm also gonna use just a dab of blue Loctite just to ensure it doesn't come out. And then it says to torque to 15 to 18 foot-pounds. You can see the difference between the two fans. There's not a huge difference in overall diameter, 18 versus 19, but the pitch of this blade, you can see, is not that steep versus the pitch of this blade, which is significantly more angled and scooped, so I'm hoping this is going to move a lot more air. I am a little bit concerned about the thickness of this package. As you can see, it's a lot deeper than this one, so hopefully it fits. The Hayden clutch comes with this little bushing, and if it applies to you, you put it right in there and it'll center itself around your water pump snout. And for us, this is needed, so we're good to go. On the water pump, I put one bolt in temporarily just so I can rest the fan assembly while I put in the other 3 bolts, just to make things a little bit easier. The fan is installed. It was a relatively easy installation. You can see how much clearance is at the tips around the shroud. It definitely sits in deeper towards the radiator than the other fan, which is not ideal. But there is clearance everywhere. It's not contacting the radiator, so we should be ready to fire it up. The fan did not fix the problem. As you can see, it's getting to the same amount of temperature, which is a real drag. I really thought that this was going to make a difference, but unfortunately it didn't. So we're going to have to install the lower pulley. So you can see the difference between the 5.5-inch pulley that came off the car and the 7-inch pulley that is going on. Now at the beginning of the video, I believe I said that my system is 25% underdriven. That's not exactly accurate. I have a 6.25-inch water pump pulley, and combined with the 5.5-inch crankshaft pulley, the water pump is about 12 or 13% underdriven. So with an 800 RPM idle speed, the water pump is actually turning only about 700 RPM. Going up to the 7-inch pulley, my water pump is now 12% overdriven, and with an 800 RPM idle speed, the water pump is now turning at about 900 RPM. So a difference of 200 RPM, not just in water pump, but also the fan. That should be significant. And that also equates to the 25% underdrive that I had before. One thing to keep in mind is if you change your pulleys, you may have to change your belt sizes. And obviously I did. I bought a whole swack of belts just to get the right one. I landed on the 7455, 46 and an 1/8 inch long for the alternator belt, and the 7410, which is 41 and 5/8 for the power steering belt. Guys, I think we might have this fixed. I've let this idle for a long time, and it just can't seem to climb very high. By now it'd be well over 200 degrees, and it's struggling just to get past 190. So if you ask me, I think we solved our problem. Well, it looks like we fixed our cooling issues. Driving around, which has always been good, is still very good. It might even be better. Right now I'm just putting around at about 35 kilometers an hour. It's 165 degrees according to one gauge, 159 on the other. At idle, as you saw, I mean, it took a long time just to creep up to 192, which at that time frame probably would have been 220, 230 at least. So huge improvement, and it looks like the crankshaft pulley to get those RPMs up and the water pump RPM up was what we needed to do. So everything's great. I can't be happier about the cooling. But does that mean this thing is done and fixed? Not exactly. Ever since I put that lower crank shaft pulley on, this fan is extremely loud. Like unbearably. At idle, it's not so bad, but you get a little bit of RPM, and this thing roars. It sounds like a bus. That's 2,600 RPM. And it sounds like I'm driving a jet engine. 3,000, 3,500, and then I get a squeal even. Like, no joke about it, the fans are louder than the engine, and I can't live with that. You got a big block Chevy in a nice muscle car, you can't have the fans being louder than your engine. What's weird is I drove the car with the clutch and fan assembly with the 5.5 inch crankshaft pulley, and it didn't make any sound at all. It was normal. Throw the 7-inch pulley on, which increased the fan and water pump speed by 25%, and it's unbearable. It's so bad I actually wanted to switch it back. So the way a thermal clutch works is it takes temperature off the radiator, not your coolant temperature, but through the radiator, and we know my radiator coolant is cool. But if it's hot enough, it will essentially lock up the fan or the clutch. And according to Hayden, that locks up to 70 to 90% at maximum engagement. It seems like my clutch is effectively permanently engaged, and that's a problem, especially since it worries me to rev this engine up, because now that I've overdriven the fan a little bit, if I go up to 6,000 RPM, you know, the fan's going to be roughly the same, maybe higher. That's kind of scary. I don't want to put a fan through the hood. So at lower temperatures, like I'm running right now, the thermal clutch should be essentially freewheeling at about 30% according to Hayden. Which means if I'm revving up around 4,000 RPM, the fan should actually only be turning around 1,330 RPM or something, which should be virtually inaudible. I shouldn't be able to hear it, especially not over a big block Chevy with 3-inch exhaust. The first question I'm going to get is, why didn't I go with electric fans? For the most part, it comes down to cost. If you're going to go with electric fans, you need to get good quality parts, particularly the electric fans themselves. Also, the radiator in this car is not for a 70 to 72 Chevelle. It's some sort of universal. So I'd want to upgrade to a correct fan for this car and get the correct fan that fits that radiator. We're now into the thousands of dollars, whereas this setup was a couple of $100. A big difference. And it technically did solve the problem, which was not the radiator cap. It wasn't the radiator size. It wasn't a airflow obstruction in the radiator. It wasn't the fan. It wasn't the fan shroud. It wasn't the water pump. It wasn't some sort of obstruction in the cooling system or airflow blockage, whatever. It wasn't the timing or air-fuel ratio settings I have in the car. All these suggestions, which were excellent, I appreciate every single one of them. It turns out it was a fan / water pump RPM speed at idle caused by having underdrive pulleys. Changing that pulley sped up the fan, got more airflow through the radiator, and also sped up the water pump, which circulated the coolant a little bit quicker. I couldn't tell you which had more of an impact, but that was the fix of the problem. Which means if you have a overheating problem at idle and not really anywhere else, if you have underdrive pulleys, it's probably a good place to look. And if you like this video, hit the like button. If you want to see what I'm going to do about this thing sounding like a bus, because I cannot stand it, subscribe for more videos. And as always, thanks for watching.